Welcome to the recorded workshop session for the Business Management Distance module.
I welcome you once again for our last workshop for the course Business Management. I hope I find you well and you have been going through your work, revising and also learning something. Today, we want us to continue and look at another aspect that gives us a foundation of what business is all about. Remember, our program is Business, Bachelor of Business Administration. Now, the question is, you need to understand yourself as a manager. You need to understand yourself and be able to see what is happening around you. The last time we met, we looked at what the business environment, the environment in which business operates. We also looked at entrepreneurship and looked at the traits and characteristics of an entrepreneur. We also looked at different types of entrepreneurs, and we also looked at issues like looked at what is it that you can see to be able for you to conclude and say this person is an entrepreneur. But anyway, today we still want us to continue, and we're going to look at something that is very important and something that has been talked about, and it is still being talked about in business everywhere you go. This is what we call corporate social responsibility. Now, you will discover that the term that we are going to use today is called corporate social responsibility, but sometimes it is also referred by others in other forums as corporate citizenship. It is also called corporate social investment. Others also in the beginning, I think in the early 90s and late 80s, they used to call it philanthropy. Now, the word philanthropy only means kindness. So, when you see and hear people talking about corporate social investments, corporate social responsibility, corporate citizenship, and philanthropy, we are also referring to the same thing altogether. Now, the next thing that is also very important is to look at the definition. Now, to define all those concepts, one thing you need to realize that it is a concept that recognizes that organizations have a special responsibility for their society and natural environment. But somebody might ask, what has business to do with the society around them? What has business to do with the environment around them? Remember, when you are running a business or a company, or even as an individual, you don't operate in a vacuum. You operate in an environment where there are people. Remember the last learning unit we looked at, we said the environment, business and its environment. We say that, okay, you are running a business, but you don't operate on your own. You are not in a vacuum. You are not on an island. But there are certain forces that are operating around you that also affect the way in which you make decisions. Imagine yourself, you are a manufacturing company, and there are so many issues, for instance, of late that are being talked about regarding global warming, regarding environmental degradation, and the effect it has on the way in which we operate as society. Hence, that is where it came from. Now, companies have a responsibility for the behavior of others with whom they do business with. That is a definition that we have in Erasmus et al., and you'll find that on page 140. But looking at the society, somebody would say, what does the society has to do with business? And this is what we shall also look at. Now, corporate citizenship also recognize organizations as legal entities that are able to run their affairs, enter into contracts, the contracts that is to hire. They can also sue someone, and they can also be sued. And a company also has legal rights. Now, when we are talking of going back to maybe corporate responsibility, we also talk of issues as to the company is operating in an environment whereby there are people in that community. You need to understand their expectations. You need to understand their way of life. And in that way, you are able also to serve them, even as a company. I remember there was a situation at one time when another company was there to open, they'd discovered gold in that area. But in that same area, there were people that were staying there. And those people have been staying there since time immemorial. Now, the question comes as to say, these people, they were applying for relocation and saying to the people, you need to go, move away from where you are staying, go somewhere else whereby you are able to stay, so that we are able to mine this place and mine our gold. But the challenge was, these people had a history with that environment. They had a history with that place. It is a place whereby generations have been staying there. Graves have been dug to bury their loved ones. Now, in their tradition, it is taboo for them to leave the graveyards of their forefathers. So it actually erupted a social unrest between their company and the community. And what the company had to do was to engage the society and say, this is what we are going to do. They had to lay down a procedure and a process and explain to them the benefits of that company to them as a society. So hence, corporate social responsibility is very important. And you also have an obligation to the society that you are operating in. Now, coming back to corporate citizenship, it is also something that is linked to corporate social responsibility, but in a way that also recognize that a company is a legal entity. Now, when we say it is a legal entity, we are taking a company and giving it a human body. Hence, as human beings, when we reach over 18, even before 18, we have our own rights. We can sue someone. We also can be sued by someone in any court of law. Hence, also a company, since it has been given that persona, we call it a legal persona. A company is able to run their affairs. They are also allowed to enter into contracts with other companies. They are also expected to hire, and they have a right to sue, and they can be sued and have legal rights. Now, amid such an environment, we are saying that, again, looking at the definition of the corporate social responsibility, we say that it refers that companies' commitment to invest in projects that will benefit the community. It goes back to the story that I was telling you of a situation whereby the mining company had to sit down with the community and inform them that we are not only coming to make you leave your ancestral village, but they are going to, as we move you away, there are benefits that are going to come along with the new project. Benefits like, we are going to give you jobs. We are going to build roads. We are going to improve the environment in which you are staying. So a community like that would actually approve that. Think of it, the roads that we have even in Gauteng, the roads that we have wherever that you go. You are able to move from one place to another. But think of the bridges that have been constructed. Some of them have been constructed by companies as a community project. Think of it, other people cannot even cross over, go to the next school because there is a river. So this is with corporate social responsibility. There's something that is also very important as you look at that, is the triple bottom line. Now, with this approach, you discover that it asserts that companies' focus should not revolve around profitability. Though in the last workshop, I remember also discussing that the goal of a business, the goal of a firm is to make profit. But we are saying that other than profit, a company should also look at other issues. And if we are to measure a company's performance, we also use what we call the triple bottom line approach. This is whereby we look also at social issues. How has the company involved, how has it been involving itself in social things? Let us look at, for instance, in South Africa, let us look at what South Africa, when South Africa was preparing for the World Cup. You will, even in any country, when you watch soccer or any sporting event, you see various companies advertising. But of particular interest, one company would be advertising, or after the advert, you read a statement saying, proudly sponsored by Coca-Cola, proudly sponsored by maybe MTN, proudly sponsored by any company. So that is also what the company will be doing in terms of the social upbringing, the social contribution. Remember, if we're going to look at the benefits, if we're going to go deeper with management, there is another concept that we study also in management, that is organizational behavior, whereby we look at the contribution of sport into unity, to unity amongst people, amongst nationalities. Think of it during the World Cup, when different countries from Africa, different countries from the world were participating. At one time, I also remember that different countries, and when there was Ghana, that was the only African country that was the only one that was left into the competition. All the Africans, I remember seeing them in one accord, supporting Africa, supporting Ghana, since it is an African team. So sports has got a special thing that it brings amongst people. It brings unity. So that is why you find most companies also contributing in sport. It brings together people from all walks of life, and they begin to socialize. And if there was even some form of anger and some form of dispute, at that time and at that moment, people begin to be united. And also there are issues of the environmental terms. Think of mines. Recently in South Africa, there's been a story of a disused mine that was just left and it was not attended, and we ended up having illegal miners going there mining for gold. And of course, the unfortunate thing that happened was they actually died in the process. So these are environmental issues. And you would say, and if you were to discuss and go further, you would ask yourself, who was the owner of that abandoned mine? What did they do after the mining process has been done? They are actually laid down procedures and processes to actually protect that site after mining has been done. So when we actually go further in terms of corporate social responsibility, we can always blame that mine for abandoning such mining, such open mining shafts, and this has given people the opportunity to actually do mining illegally. Other environmental issues are when companies manufacture their products or process their products. What happens is, in their plants, there are different types of gases that are emitted through their pipes, and then what happens to the air? The air we breathe becomes contaminated, and before you know it, you can actually have some lung diseases, some form of infections through breathing of contaminated air. Hence, all the companies under in the Environmental Act, it is their responsibilities to make sure that the air that they are emitting is not poisonous for human breathing. So those are some of the measures that are taken and are used when you are using the triple bottom line approach. So even as a manager, as you are operating, you also need to think as to how is your business, how are the actions of your business impacting to the society? How are they impacting to the community? And make sure that the impact is positive, not negative, because failure to do that in business, you can end up being prosecuted by the law. Now, another thing also that is also of paramount importance and of late these days is corporate governance. Now, since we have talked about a company having given that persona, being given the legal obligation, that legal personality to be able to sue and also to be able to to be sued, and also to be able to hire people. There is one thing that is very important, that is corporate governance. We cannot separate those two things. You will discover that with corporate governance, I want you to go to the internet. I want you to pull down, search for a report called the King 3 report. My apologies, on the PowerPoint is King 2, but it's supposed to be the King 3 report. With the King 3 report, it's a comprehensive document that provides at least 7 primary principles of good governance. So as a company, as a manager, as directors of the company, you are obliged and you are expected under corporate governance to be able to show discipline in the manner in which you transact your business. Transparency, meaning that if any auditor, government auditor, wants to come and inspect what you are doing, they should do so and should get what they are looking for. Independence, again, there is also another aspect of accountability, meaning that every business, even if you are directors, even if you are managing directors or any manager, you are accountable to different people. We shall look at that later when we look at different stakeholders. As a manager, you are accountable to the owners of the company. Accountable as in you need to account to them how you have used the capital, how you have transacted every business transaction throughout the year. You need to be transparent in your activities. Whatever decisions that you make, there should be an element of responsibility. Responsibility in the way in which you engage yourself, in the way in which you make decisions for the company. Responsibility in the way you contract other companies. Responsible in the way in which you contract and hire employees. Fairness in the manner in which you recruit your employees. Remember, when you shall also be doing human resources management, you shall also look at employment equity. There are so many issues that regard fairness. And even as a company, are you fair in the way you hire your employees? Are you fair in the way you make your decisions on behalf of the directors? Are you fair in the way you dismiss your employees? Are you fair in the way you promote your employees? Are you fair in the way in which you award your salaries to your employees? Remember, that can also be checked when we look at transparency. We also look at social responsibility. So corporate governance also looks at those things. So in that report, it actually explains those 7 principles in good detail. And this King 3 report is a tool that any manager, any management student should actually know the contents and be able to actually put it into practice even as you are making decisions. Remember, last time, one thing you should understand is managers or leaders, they are known according to the decisions that they make. So you really need to be aware of that. So whatever decision that you make in life, whatever decision that you are going to make as a manager, make sure that you are going to be assessed pertaining to that decision. So there's no room for failure and so forth. One thing that you should also know is that the extent to which corporate governance practices are enforced by law will differ from one country to another. Well, we've talked about fairness in companies, we've talked about transparency, we've talked about accountability. But one thing you should understand that as you move from your one country to another, you will discover that each and every country has got its own way that it emphasizes. But it doesn't mean that there is nothing that has been discussed on corporate governance. It has been discussed, but remember, even if we are to go back to our families, we all come from different families, we have got different rules. So the law will differ from one country to another. Another country is very strict. Other countries are flexible. So that is one thing you should also understand. I remember I was reading another article, but don't remember which country it was. It was another South African who actually decided to further his business. He did very well here in South Africa, and said he wanted to go further, to go global. I can't remember which other country where he actually started his business, but only to discover that he was he was found wanting in that one other aspect of corporate governance in terms of fairness. Because what happened was, before business, he knew it, he had hired people. And when he hired people, business did not succeed. And in that country, the principles and the laws regarding hiring and firing of employees is very strict. So that guy found himself paying and being sued in that country for unfair dismissal. So any manager should actually think about it. Think about the impact their decision is going to make to the business, and also see what the law has to say regarding that. Another thing that is also very important, earlier on I mentioned on stakeholder engagement. Now, looking at stakeholder engagement, one thing that is also very important is to understand what is a stakeholder. Now, a stakeholder, basically, these are individuals. There may be individuals, it might be a group of people who are affected by the decisions made by a company. They are affected. Now, let me say one thing. If I'm to give you an example, you are a student, you are stakeholders of Rosebank College. Why would I say you are stakeholders? Whatever decision that Rosebank is going to make today, whether it wants to close down, whether it wants to expand, you are going to be affected one way or another. You have also invested in this company in the form of fees, and you are expecting something from Rosebank College. So that makes you to be a stakeholder. But there's something that is also very interesting in our book that is also important that we should look at. We have got two primary stakeholders, right? And the primary stakeholders are, we have primary and the secondary stakeholders. So we need to look at who constitute those two, right? Oh, I'm sorry about that. Can I just... Okay, just forget about this slide. Right? Now, when you look at these stakeholders, and we talk about the primary stakeholders, we can look at, in any organization, you discover that there are issues like, in an organization, if, just one moment, if I can look at the textbook. Okay, now, one thing that we need to realize is that if we are talking of primary stakeholders, if I can put this in writing, this would actually involve, in a situation like ours, it will involve right, if you are to look at primary stakeholders, in the example that I have given you for Rosebank College, you would constitute, it will constitute primary stakeholders. These are directors of the company, right, or the owners. It will also constitute employees of Rosebank, right? It will also constitute students, right? This is an example of primary stakeholders for our institution. But we also have what we call secondary stakeholders, right? Secondary stakeholders. Examples for Rosebank College would include suppliers of textbooks, suppliers of stationery. It will also include suppliers of textbooks for the library, stationery, etc. And also, it will also include the government. Now, someone might ask, why is the government involved? The government is involved in the activities of any company in there that is operating in its country, because they want to see if they are serving right the citizen of the country, or they are not, if any company is not actually breaking any form of rules regarding the way in which you operate your business. You also have suppliers, the government. You also have another stakeholder, might also be the community, right? The people that stay around where your business is sited. So one thing you should understand, that with secondary stakeholders, these are external. And primary stakeholders, these are internal. Right. All of these stakeholders, they are affected by the decisions that are made by the company. Directors are affected in that. For instance, if a company does not pursue the making of profit, that you'll have a problem. There is also employees. Employees, again, if the company decides not to, just to close down, all the employees are going to be affected because they will wake up not having jobs. Students are also affected in that if the company decides to close down anytime, students will not have anywhere to study. Suppliers, again, they are interested because sometimes they have a stake, as in they might borrow the company their stuff like textbook or stationery, and they're expecting the company to pay on time. The government, I've explained that earlier on. We also have the community. It also goes on like that. Another aspect also that is very important is today, if you are to look at corporate social responsibility, there is something that I want you to do. If you are to look at our module guide, I want you to look at our module guide. Page 78, right? Here, there is something that is also very important that I want us to do. If you look at an activity, there's an activity that is very important. I want you also to have a look at it, and we shall meet and discuss this on the forum, whereby we are going to read about a situation that happened on the internet. Research the corporate scandals that occurred at Enron and WorldCom. So I want you to read on Enron and WorldCom, and we shall discuss this further on our forum. So this is something that I'm going to give you so that we have a platform to discuss. Remember, you need to participate because it will really affect, it will really actually help us just one moment. What happened? I made a mistake. Let's use this. So I want us to look at the module guide, page 78, and we are going to read on right. We'll discuss this on the forum next time, this week, anytime this week, and then we'll continue to read and further ourselves, sharpen our minds on corporate social responsibility. Another thing that is also very important is you need to understand that corporate social responsibility impacts on the impacts on so many areas, and also that there are so many people, so many things that are looked at, which include social drivers, right? Of the social drivers, like I say, that you need to contribute to community projects, you also need to, as a company, to be found involved in maybe orphanages, assisting. Another social driver could be the poor. You could also be found doing something to the poor or the socially disadvantaged, right? So it's the poor or the poor or the socially disadvantaged. So people are disadvantaged in so many ways, right? You also, other social drivers are to also help with the street kids. We also have problems in every country. There are problems with street kids, right? How do you help these abandoned children? How do you assist them to ensure that they have a life? So that is also very important, that you are expected to contribute. And then also we talked of the government. We also have government drivers. So government also has pressure that it places on every company regarding abiding. Are you abiding by the law? Abiding by the law. So the government acts as a protector of the citizen, acts protecting the citizens from different and unscrupulous business practices. For instance, you can imagine if the government does not control the manufacture and use of drugs, other companies would actually open big laboratories and operate and selling drugs to every kid, to everyone in the streets. But imagine the impact it will have to our community. Hence, the government also acts as a watchdog of what the business of any company is. We also look at issues like, let's talk of brothels, abusing young girls, taking them as sex slaves. So if the government does not actually probe into the activities of the business, of any business, think of it, what will happen? What if the business will just be doing business, not paying tax to the government? How will the government enable to construct public buildings, to construct issues that are the hospitals for the public, roads for the public, schools for the public? It will actually disadvantage everyone else. We also have issues like market drivers, right? There are issues of competition, right? And how would you do your business? How do you compete as businesses? There has to be fair operation of business, fair competition. You need to ensure that even if you have a competitor, the way you do it is in a way that does not disadvantage others. There are also issues like ethical drivers, right? Ethical drivers. Right. When you're talking of ethics, we shall also look at it later in management. But basically, we are actually looking at what is wrong and what is the right thing to do. What is the wrong thing to do and what can be termed as the right thing to do for companies and for individuals. Now, for instance, is it right for a company to be able to hire children that are below 16 years, employing them? So it is something that is of a law, but at the same time is unethical. Is it right for the company to dismiss a woman who was pregnant and to say that because you went home to have a baby, no, therefore there's no longer your job here? Is it right? So all those aspects, we can take these four aspects and actually bracket them and say this is what we talk about when we're talking of corporate social responsibility, or CSR. Now, the other thing that is also very important, even at this juncture, is to also to look at something also that I had not mentioned, that is the role of and responsibilities within a company in terms of good corporate governance. We looked at the 7 aspects that corporate governance is all about. We said it says everything to do with discipline, transparency, accountability, responsibility, fairness, and social responsibility. But what are some of the roles and responsibilities that are found in the company in terms of good governance? For instance, number 1, there's something that is also very important regarding the board of directors. Now, with the board of directors, this is a group of people, right, with rights and responsibilities that are given to them by the company, that they should function, that the company should function at its best and in the interest of directors. So board of directors are there and are actually given their roles and rights and responsibilities by the owners of the company to make sure they serve the interest of the company. So what do the board of directors also would, at the end of the day, delegate some of its functions to board committees and management to ensure that the vision and mission of the company is also reached. There is also what we call something that is also interesting, is we also and have heard about executive or non-executive directors. Basically, executive directors, they are appointed by members of the management. These are members of the management team, right, that are appointed on the board on full time, right? They are from management, general people who have got areas of specialization that the company might want, but what do? They incorporate them to be part of the directors, right? And then non-executive directors, on the contrary, are independent from management and are not involved in the day-to-day. So executive directors, they are part of management, I'll just abbreviate this, management team. They are involved, they are in the day-to-day activities of the company. Right, that is somebody who is called an executive director. But on the contrary, here, something of interest, non-executive, right? Non-executive directors, Non-executive directors, on the contrary, are not part of, they are not part of the management team. They are not involved. They are not involved in the day-to-day activities of the company. Right. So basically, that is the distinction that you really, which is actually important, and you really need to take note of that. Now, the other question that somebody might come up with is, okay, before we look at that, we also need to look at the chairperson or the chairman, right? Who is a chairman, right, of the board, or the chief executive officer. Now, chairman of the board, it might be required to be an independent or a non-executive director, meaning that he might be independent or is part of the management team. Now, this person is responsible for the running of the board and the chief executive officer for running the company. So the chairperson of the board, okay, let me put it like this. The chairperson is responsible for the board, right? And the CEO, that is chief executive officer, is responsible for the day-to-day. The day-to-day running of the business. That is in charge of all senior managers. Right, so at the end of the day, the CEO will also report everything to the chairperson of the board. So here is another superior committee that is running the company that is up there. And remember, it also has executive and non-executive directors, and it depends. Executive, I've explained as to how they are separated, but we have what we call the CEO. This one is a senior manager and is responsible to the day-to-day activities and running of the business. One other thing that is also very important is stakeholder engagement. Now, like we said, that it is also important for a company or for an organization to be able to be involved with all the stakeholders. Now, we have talked about the government as our stakeholder. The government, we said the government is a stakeholder, right? We have also talked about employees as stakeholders. We have talked about suppliers as stakeholders. We have also talked about the directors as stakeholders, directors or the owners of the companies as stakeholders. Now, we have also talked about students, yes, as stakeholders, for the example of, say, Rosebank College. But looking at all these things, one thing that is important is, how do you then as a company engage with all these stakeholders? How do you engage? You need to establish a policy, a corporate policy, as to say, how are we going to be involved with all these stakeholders? For instance, I'll start with the government. Number one, the only engagement process to be involved in or to ensure that to be involved in all the activities or the activities initiated by the government that are in line with your business. Another involvement is to abide by the laws, right? What is also important, and for employees, fairness, right? Hear what employees are expecting, hear what employees are looking from you, expecting from you. And also with employees, you also need to involve them in decision making. How about suppliers? Of the suppliers' payment? Pay the debts or dues on time. How about directors and owners? Ensure that there is return on investment. Ensure how about students? Ensure right? Ensure that you deliver what you have promised. With students, another aspect is with students, you can also, for instance, you can actually come up with bursaries, right? Bursaries for students who are intelligent but disadvantaged. So this is how, it's just an example of how a company can engage itself with all the stakeholders. How can they engage themselves with the stakeholders? But one thing you should note, this is not exhaustive. It is just a guide to us as to how so that you have an idea as to say how a company can be involved. But one thing that you should also understand is it will differ from one company to another. So you need to understand and be quite alert to see that each and every company will be different. Now, one thing that we need, that is also very important, is to look at what we call the stakeholder engagement process. Now, with the stakeholder engagement process, you will discover that it is a process. Now, when you look at a process, all the time you are looking at something that has got a beginning and an end, but at the same time it is always revolving. Now, when you are looking at how then do you, somebody might ask, we have said that you need to be involved with your stakeholders. But the question is, how can I be involved with my stakeholders? How can I be involved with my stakeholders? Now, this here is a process for any beginner. You need to prepare. Right. So we can actually talk of this, that when you are actually, this is what we call stakeholder engagement process. So what you need to do is you need to prepare is something. Prepare yourself to say who is identify here when you are preparing. Basically, what you are doing is you are identifying who is your stakeholder. Who is your stakeholder, or who are your stakeholders in your particular business. When you have identified who they are, see how you are involved. How you are involved and what you are going to do. Define what you are going to do. So that is preparing. So when you have defined that, so you have to further say, okay, we have identified, or maybe, I'm sorry, this is, the first stage is just prepare, identify who your stakeholders is. When you've identified your stakeholders, plan. The next stage is identify how you are going to help them. And identify, when you have identified how you are going to help them, how you are going to make them involved, the next thing is design, come up with an engagement process. What is it that you are going to do which is unique according to what you are doing? So this is the what aspect. What is it that you are going to do? Now you have designed and you now have it. Now, when you are now engaging, you are involving everyone. Here, you are now involving what? Their stakeholders. You are involving the stakeholders at this stage. Now that you have involved the stakeholders, at the end of the day, you have done something. You need to sit down and say, ask yourself, here you are now asking yourself. You are now asking yourself, you are now asking, has it worked? Right? If yes, what do? You continue. That is, if yes, you continue. If no, if the answer is no, you what? You adjust. Right? Because you have talked to them, you have involved them, but you are saying, is it likely going to work? If it is going to work, continue. But if it is not going to work, you need to adjust. And then the final stage, now having reworked it and everything, you are now applying it. And when you are now applying it, you are now actually delivering here. So we can say you are now delivering. Right? So this is what we call the stakeholder engagement process. Now, there is something that is also very important, even in the process of learning, in the process of involving and engaging, in the process of corporate social responsibility. There's something that is very important, which is called sustainable development. We have heard about sustainable development over time. And now looking at sustainable development, looking at it, you will discover that there are two things that are looked at. It looks at the meeting of the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. That is sustainable development. You are saying, what is it that we are doing today? Right? You now know it. How is it going to affect us today, benefit us, but at the same time without affecting future generations? Now, we are saying that if we are using cell phones, if we are mining mines, it is going to help today's generation in that the economy will be boosted. But how will it affect the future generation if the resources get finished? How will it affect? Remember, we have got shafts that are open cast mines, that are left open. But the question is, how do you ensure that whatever that you are doing today is not affecting future generations in simple terms? So you look at, under that, you look at two concepts. The concept concept of needs, and the idea of limitations. So this is basically what you do, limitations. This is basically what you do when you are looking at sustainable development. And for interest's sake, if there's so much that has been written and said about sustainable development, and for your own interest, you can actually read even on the internet, magazines, and even in newspapers. It is a subject that is of interest that really you need to actually take interest in. Right, with that, this brings us to the end of Learning Unit 5. We will continue, and I want us to continue and look at Learning Unit 6. That is going to bring us into the introduction of our subject. Whatever that we have been doing from Learning Unit 1 up to 5, it was just an overview, as to say, to give us a foundation of what we